Salvete omnes, and welcome to today's lesson. So today we are going to talk about cases, which is pretty important if you want to learn Latin. So what are we actually going to be covering in today's video? Well, we're going to be looking at 5 things. So we're going to be looking at what a noun is, how English constructs a sentence, how Latin constructs a sentence and how it's different from the way that English constructs a sentence, what actually is a case, and then finally, we're going to have a brief introduction to Latin cases. So, first things first, what is a noun? Well, a noun is a part of speech, and English has a lot of parts of speech. You can see the main 7, nouns, verbs, articles, prepositions, adjectives, adverbs, conjunctions. It's not a definitive list, there's lots more parts of speech, but those are sort of the main 7 that we use to construct a sentence. Now, the 2 ones that we're going to be looking at today are nouns and verbs. So let's go a little bit deeper. So a noun can be defined generally as a person, place, or thing. Probably remember that from Year 2 English if you're a native English speaker. But if we want to be a bit more finicky about it, and Latin is nothing if not finicky, we can split that down further into 4 different categories. So we've got proper nouns, so that's the name of a person, place, or thing. So for example, Rachel, Paris, Samsung. Or you can have concrete nouns. So concrete nouns are nouns that you can physically touch, they're tangible. And they're basically most nouns. Most nouns are concrete nouns. So for example, boy, apple, table, etc., etc. Then we've got abstract nouns. So these are the opposite of concrete nouns. These are nouns that you can't touch. So happiness, beauty, anxiety, a lot of these sort of, cancer. This is not something that you can touch. And then finally, we've got collective nouns. So these are nouns that are describing a group of nouns. So a pack of dogs or a school of fish. Okay, so we've got what a noun is. Now let's look at how English constructs a sentence. So English constructs a sentence in the most basic form by combining nouns with verbs. So generally, if we want to construct a normal sentence, we're going to need a subject, which is the noun, which is doing the verb, doing the action of the verb. Then we've got the verb, which is the action of the sentence. And then we've got the object. So this is the noun that is receiving the action of the verb. So if we want to make this a little bit more clear, we can look at an example. So an example sentence might look something like, Cindy loves cake, right? So we've got a noun, it's a proper noun, Cindy, and she's doing an action. She's doing the verb of the sentence, so that makes her the subject. And then we've got the verb, which is loving, that's the action that Cindy is doing. And then we've got cake. So cake is the noun that is receiving Cindy's love. It's receiving the action, right? Now, the one thing that we can know as English speakers is that if I flipped this sentence and said, Cake loves Cindy, that doesn't mean the same thing as the original sentence, right? It does not mean the same thing because English uses word order, right? So if we go back to that basic formula of subject plus verb plus object, we not only need those 3 components, but we need those components to be in that order. So in this sentence, the cake is the one doing the action and Cindy is the one receiving the action. So the cake has been made into the subject of the sentence and Cindy's been made into the object of the sentence just by changing around the word order. So that's how English constructs a sentence. We construct a sentence through word order, the order that the words are placed. Now, as an English speaker, you probably know that most English sentences aren't as basic as just subject, verb, object. That's where all of the other parts of speech that we looked at before, like prepositions and articles and adjectives and adverbs, come in to create more complex sentences. Like, Cindy, a happy girl, occasionally loves a slice of cake after dinner in a restaurant. That's a perfectly valid English sentence. However, if we have a look at it, really, it's just the same. It's the same sentence, right? We've got the subject and the verb and the object. So this is basically all show, right? It's giving us a bit more information, it's giving us a bit more context, but the sentence will always be in English, subject, verb, object. And then all of the other stuff is just sort of window dressing. Now, let's have a look at how Latin constructs a sentence, because it does it slightly differently. It doesn't use word order. So it doesn't matter if it's subject, verb, object like English, or verb, subject, object, or object, subject, verb. It all means the exact same thing. So let's have a look at an example sentence. So this sentence means Claudia loves bread. So we can either in Latin say Claudia amet panem, or amet panem Claudia, or panem Claudia amet. They all mean the exact same thing. And the reason why they mean the same thing is because there's some sneaky stuff happening. Can't see that very well in the red against the red, but there's some sneaky stuff happening with the nouns themselves, right? Which, hint, hint, is going to be the cases that we're going to talk about later on, right? It's the ending of the word that's telling us what function it's serving in the sentence, rather than the word order. So, if we wanted to flip this sentence the same way that we flipped Cindy loves cake to cake loves Cindy, we'd have to do it in a different way. We would do it like this. Claudiam amet panis. Bread loves Claudia. Now, if you are a particularly keen observer, you might notice that the endings have changed, right? It's no longer Claudia, it's Claudiam, and it's no longer panem, it's panis, right? So the endings of the words have changed, and that allows us to translate the sentence in a different way, right? It allows the nouns to have a different function within the sentence. Okay, so don't worry if you don't get it completely off the bat. It's a bit tricky to wrap your head around. But basically in Latin, you're looking at the ending of a word to tell its function in the sentence rather than the word order. So let's have a look at a Latin noun. So this is a pretty basic noun, puella, it means girl, and all Latin words, nouns, adjectives, adverbs, we'll get onto that later, you don't need to worry about that now. Let's just worry about nouns. So all Latin nouns can be split into two separate parts, right? We've got the root, which is the part of the noun that doesn't change, and then we've got the ending, which is the part of the word that does change, and that's the part that tells us how the noun is functioning in a sentence. So let's have a look at this. This is a table, a table of cases, right? More specifically, it's a table of the first declension feminine nouns. So we can have a look at this. Puella, puella, puellam, puellai, puellai, puella, puellai, puellai, puellas, puellarum, puellis, puellis. So the more astute among you might have already picked the two columns that we've got. We've got singular and plural. Now, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? The singular is telling us whether there's one girl or many girls in the case of the plural with the second column. Now, then we've got all of these rows, right? We've got nominative, vocative, accusative, genitive, dative, ablative. That's a lot to take in. English doesn't have that. English has singular and plural, but we don't have nominative and vocative and accusative and so on and so on. But just stay with me for a minute. We're going to go over those definitions in a second. But just have a look and just observe for now that this noun has a root. It has the puel, which never changes, and then it's got the endings. So the cases are on the left-hand side, and then we've got the singular and plural. So the ending of a noun is going to change based on what case it is and whether it's singular or plural. And then that will allow you to decipher what the ending means. But knowing what this table is doesn't really make sense if you don't know what all of the words on the left mean. So let's meet the team. Let's meet your new best friends. A who's who of Latin cases. Okay, so first off the bat, we have got the nominative. And the nominative is usually pretty easy for English speakers to wrap their head around because it identifies the subject of the sentence, which is what we were just talking about. So the person or thing who is acting out the verb. So in the previous sentence, Claudia amet panem, Claudia is in the nominative because she's the one doing the verb. Okay, so we've got an example sentence here. Hey Caesar, Marius's brother is giving a helmet to Fabius. Right? So in this sentence, brother is the person who's doing the giving, right? It's the brother who's doing the giving. So that word in Latin would be in the nominative and in the singular. Okay, then we've got the vocative, a very shouty case because it's identifying a person or thing that's being addressed by the speaker. So in the sentence, hey Caesar, Marius's brother is giving a helmet to Fabius. Caesar is going to be in the vocative case, right? Because Caesar's the person who's being addressed. We've got the famous et tu Brute, in which case Brutus is in the vocative, right? It changes from Brutus to Brute because Caesar's directly addressing Brutus. Okay, then we've got the accusative. So the accusative is going to be identifying the object of the sentence, which we also looked at. So this is the person or thing to whom the verb is happening. So, hey Caesar, Marius's brother is giving a helmet to Fabius. Helmet in Latin would be in the accusative because it's the object that's being given. Now, we get into the slightly trickier cases, so brace yourself. Then we've got the genitive. So the genitive identifies a person or thing who possesses or is related to another noun, right? So we've got this idea of the dog's dinner, which you could also say in another way in English, the dinner of the dog, right? So it's possessive, right? It's showing who owns the dinner. So in Hey Caesar, Marius's brother is giving a helmet to Fabius. You might not say that Marius owns his brother, but he's certainly related to his brother, right? So the genitive's providing usually more information about another noun in the sentence, right? So it's sort of giving us extra information and context. Okay, now we've got the dative. So the dative identifies the indirect object of the sentence. So the person or thing who is affected by the action of the verb. So this is sometimes a little bit tricky to wrap your head around, but sometimes a verb can have two objects, right? It has a direct object, the verb that is being directly affected by the action, and then it's got an indirect object, which is a noun that's being affected by the action of the verb, but is not necessarily having the action of the verb done to them, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So if we look at the example sentence, hey Caesar, Marius is giving a helmet to Fabius, right? Marius is not giving Fabius, right? He's not gifting Fabius to the zoo or something like that, right? He's giving something else to Fabius. So Fabius is being affected by the act of giving, but he's not the thing being given. So that's what makes him an indirect object versus a direct object. Okay, now we're almost done. And we've left the most complicated case till last, the ablative. The ablative is a bit of a jack of all trades. It's a bit of a catch-all. It's sort of whatever function that you need a noun to do that hasn't been covered by the rest of the cases sort of ends up falling on the ablative. Usually it's providing extra information in the sentence, and in English we often translate it with a preposition because there's no real equivalent of the ablative case in English. So you usually, if you see an ablative, try inserting by noun, from noun, in noun, with noun, or at noun, and see if that makes any sense. So if we have a look at the sentence, Marius was helped in battle by Fabius, the word battle and Fabius in Latin would be going into the ablative case, right? Because they're providing extra information, and they might be in a prepositional phrase in Latin, or they might just be in the ablative case. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the lesson. Those are the 6 cases. Hopefully that's given you something of an understanding, a basic understanding. I've written a blog post that I'll link below, which hopefully will give you a bit more in-depth if you're more of a reader than a listener. But yes, that's it, and happy Latining.